Hey everybody, Robert Lee, National Fire Radio. Here live at Aerial Scope Bucket Bar. Every time I do one of these intros, Jeremy's got a chuckle, laugh, or smirk just to try to mess me up. Anyway, we're here with Dan Rothermel, Jeremy, Tucker, myself, Seb behind the camera. Jeremy, take it away.
I'm taking it away. Dan, thanks, brother.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So, real quick, couple quick stories, and then we're going to capture your story.
All right.
And we have, this is our first shot, first shoot that we have a live audience tonight, too. So we got a couple guys in the background, and we'll certainly introduce them in a minute.
You guys got to clap.
Yeah. But I'll tell you this, Dan. We have been, this has been a whirlwind year for us at National Fire Radio, and part of what's exciting about what we get to do and what we've created is we get to meet guys like you and guys like these guys here who have such a passion and history for the craft, and we are humbled and honored to be here. So thank you.
Oh, you're very
We're
welcome.
in your home. This is your man cave, if you will, and man, I'm freaking jealous of it, and I hope to have a room like this too one day and so on. But incredible. But where I want to go with this is that you and I got mixed up through Rob.
Yep.
So East Cape Clothing is your graphics company, your t-shirt company,
Yep.
And so on. And you've been nice enough to do and work with us on all of our Tiller Time product and our National Fire Radio shirts and so on. So earlier today we shot down at the factory real quick and shot how you do it and so on. And that is your side hustle on top of being a career fireman.
Yes.
And so it's apparent today, man. We've had an incredible day so far. We have a long way to go this afternoon and tonight with you, but this is turning into quite a day. But here we are. We're sitting at your bar. This bucket has some history with me as well. This was the second alarm companies to my hometown.
Sure.
Used to run this truck on their Mac. They used to run this bucket, so there's a lot of history here sitting in this thing, which is a retired FDNY rig.
Yep. 161.
And then Whitecroft, New Jersey.
Yep.
And then it went elsewhere too,
Yeah.
right?
So it went into the float pool basically. I guess the Seagrave dealer in New Jersey picked it up, and they would loan it out. It was a place called Bridgeport for a while. It was a place called Oceanside for a while.
Yeah.
Kind of popped around. If you ordered a new scope or you had one down, if this was available, it ended up at your firehouse, and you beat the shit out of it, apparently.
Yeah.
But no, so to bring up to how I got to this point,
please.
how I wanted to do this. So when I was going to college in the 80s, early 90s, I lived at Progress in Harrisburg, and we had a tower ladder there. I worked 3 to 11, and I was the truck lieutenant, so I would do my checkout at night after I got off shift. So I would come in, nobody else would be around. I'd be checking off, make sure everything's good. And I remember one night I climbed up into the bucket to check on all the tools and make sure everything was good. And I just thought, man, this is, I really, this is my happy place almost, you know what I mean? Like if I'm in here going to a roof, this is it for me. And I just always thought, man, what if you just put a top on here? You could make this a kick-ass bar. So, lo and behold,
you made a kick-ass bar.
Yeah, winner, chicken dinner over here.
So, lo and behold, 17, 18 years later, we were building this house, and I decided I was going to put this into motion. I had heard about this truck that was possibly going to be stripped of parts.
Yeah.
And I was tracking it down, and then we were taking it from one place to another. The flywheel exploded, caught the truck on fire. It ended up down at Interstate Truck in Hagerstown. And I called down there to the girl, and she said, yeah, it was available. I drove down to see it, and I got down there, and actually Kentland had just rolled their truck over, and they had taken the Kentland bucket off as well. So now I'm sitting there like, man, what do I do? Like, here's this bucket with everything on it, the doors, the controls,
right.
everything, or there's Kentland's bucket that they stripped everything off of. So I'm like, what do you do in that situation? So I bought them both.
That's awesome.
Yep. So it was fun. I just loaded this thing in the back of my truck. I went back, got the other one later on. But this thing had the gun on it still, and all the controls and the leveling cylinders, and it was like in the back of my truck going up 81. It's like people are driving by looking at me. But I brought it back, started polishing, and here it is. Shout out to Rich Seacrest from Specialized Fire in Middletown. I had a whole design how I wanted to do this, and I sat down with him, and and I have this and this, and he looked at me square in the eye. He said, "Well, if we didn't know anything about working with metal, this is probably how we do it. But I'm going to show you what we're going to do." And he
That's fantastic.
He fabricated this, and And
It's certainly a piece, man. I am absolutely jealous, and I would love to get this in the back of my truck. We're just never gonna get it out of here. You're gonna have to take the wall down to get it out of here. But this is awesome. I mean, really. And so let's talk about you a little bit. I mean, this is all about meeting guys that really have a passion for the job, and you, I mean, really are connected in every which way I can imagine, and from what I've seen with just the guys that you surround yourself with, and the and so on. So maybe we can talk about your career a little bit and how you got started and so on.
all right, so it's kind of a mess. But when I was young, I grew up in Lawn, Pennsylvania. It's just a 2-horse town. I mean, literally the only thing there was a post office and a fire company.
Yeah.
None of my parents, or as far as I know, any of my relatives were ever firemen. It was the only thing of any interest that was going on, and fortunately
You didn't want to be a postman?
No. So there was a fireman there. His name was Ivan Hansen, and I mean, I was little, like maybe 7, 8, 9, 10 in that era, and he just kind of every time there was something going on, he took time and let me put a coat on, let me work with a hose, put an air pack on me, and that kind of spawned the interest. And I moved overseas with my father. A couple years after that, I met a guy over there from the Chicago Fire Department that worked for the government that was in charge of like arranging and rearranging their fire department. So I got into stuff over there, and he got me a scanner, and I had a cool little badge, and I had some gear. And the first time I was really allowed to go into a call, it was a 747 crash at the Manila International Airport. So
So what was your first fire?
So my first fires, we do this thing on the show sometimes with our guests. We talk about your first fire, you know?
Tell me about food on the stove. Oh,
Yeah.
wait, no.
All right, so you got a 747 that crashed.
yeah, so that was fun. I was there for like 3 days, and I ended up getting a bunch of letters from.
Was it like a cargo plane, a passenger?
Oh no, it's passengers. It's Korean Airlines Flight 007 going back to Seoul, Korea.
How many souls on board?
There's like 290 or something. It was a lot. It was a full plane. And,
where did this happen?
Manila, Philippines. It skidded off the runway and went into the onto the service road. I have some photo albums. We'll pull them out later, and it's pretty neat shit.
That's wild.
So I got all kinds of letters and stuff from the president of the airline, the guy from Chicago. It was kind of neat. So I was like, man, this is really, those were the two major things for me that kind of got me involved. Moved back here, moved to the Hershey, Hummelstown area, got certified as an EMT, which I don't know if I should tell that story, but basically before computers, you had to be 16 in Pennsylvania to become an EMT, and I wanted to do it so badly, they wouldn't let you start the class until you were 16, and I think I might have made an error on my application, and the class started in September, and then we were testing in December. And I remember asking for the application back to make sure that I hadn't made an error, and I corrected it. So by the time I was an EMT, I was 16. I don't think you can do that now with computers. But,
No.
So I did that, and then I wasn't at Hershey. I was at Union Deposit, and we didn't have very many calls. And I kept hearing about, you'd hear the city, and you'd hear, Progress would be rolling out calls all the time. Finally got to go on a big fire where Progress was there, and these dudes rolled off. Every one of them had a tool. There was no question. Everybody had a job. They just went right to work. I mean, we're talking mid-'80s now, before anybody really did that shit. And I was pretty impressed. So a friend of mine was moving in there, and I talked to him, and I was like, you know what? I want to make the move. I want to be as good as I can be. So I moved into Progress, and as Jason can attest, man, it was a different world. They're still doing a lot of good stuff there. And I mean, that once you get into the environment where you have the right people around you that just drill training. I mean, this thing in here where it says back to the truck.
Yeah.
I mean, Jason can attest to that, man. If you didn't throw the ladders right, it could be the last thing. If you didn't tie off right, or angle wasn't right, that was done. You went back to the truck and started all over. And I still throw ladders today the way that he taught me to throw them.
Yeah.
And that's just, I loved it there. Met my wife while I was there, ended up getting married. At that time, I worked for the Turnpike as a first responder, and I worked there for 23 years. About 21 years into it, I got diagnosed with cancer. Wow. Hodgkin's lymphoma. I had to do chemo, radiation, and I was like, you know what? I don't want to be a first responder on the Turnpike. The other thing that leading up to that is with the drivers, I had jumped over the guardrail like 3 or 4 times in a year where I almost got hit.
Wow.
And I was working by myself. You would go out to a crash by yourself. It's a little hairy. You can imagine you're out there by yourself. You're trying to do patient care. When I started, we had ambulances. on the turnpike, and then they just went to that State Farm thing that they do now. So it was kind of getting out of where my interest was.
Right.
And from jumping over the guardrail and then the cancer thing, I was like, you know what, I'm done. And my wife.
I remember that you told me that story and you related it. You were like, "Oh, this is what I did," and then this event happened. And I just stole your thunder. You're about.
Yeah, that's.
But what was it that your wife kind of? Because I remember you describing this.
Right.
To me.
So it's a hell of a thing when you're 37 years old. You have 2 kids. Small kids, and you're sitting across from a doctor, and she's like, "You need to get your affairs in order." And I'm like, "What do you mean? Like, if this doesn't work,
Wow.
I
couldn't even imagine.
it was mind blowing. So, you do a lot of soul searching, and you look at your kids a different way, you look at your life a different way. And my wife's like, "Do you have any regrets?" And I said, "Well, I had applied in New York City with a friend of ours from Progress. There was 3 of us had gone up and taken the test, and we did fairly well. I got my card to go up and do the CPAT equivalent at the time, and one of the guys that we had gone with had gotten killed the year before, and I had 9 years in. And the guy who got me interested in New York City, Miles Bojanic, used to live in Pembroke. He was like, "Dude, don't do it." He's like, "If you're happily married," like I had 1 more year to go to be vested at the turnpike, and he's like, "Don't do it." And I'm like, "Well, why not? It's my whole life. It's my dream."
Right.
And he's like, "No, dude." He's like, "You're going to get a divorce. Like, it's like your retirement. It's your wife. It's your family. It's everything you're going to lose. Just so you know that." Like, he was brutally honest with me, and I hated him at the time, but retrospect, you really appreciate it. So I said to my wife after, fast forward, I was like, the only thing that I regret is that maybe that wasn't the right time, but I never tried after that to get a career job.
Right.
I think I'd be really good at it.
Right.
So she said, "Well, why don't you promise me or promise yourself that once you get through this, that's what you'll do." And I was like, "That's a fucking great idea." So it was like through her that I was like, wow, what a neat, like most people fight cancer, they go through it like, "Oh, I just want to get through it." I'm like, I got a compass. I got a compass. I'm drawing a 100-mile radius around my house to see like the departments.
Yeah.
Like this is like, computers were just kind of coming in, so it wasn't like it is now where you can pull shit up. So I'm mailing to places, Allentown, send me information about your department, stuff like that. So I actually had 2 goals. Like there was never really any question in my mind whether I was not going to live or not. My question was, where am I going to get hired?
That is incredible. Like, think about that for a minute, right? Like, 37, diagnosed with cancer, get your affairs in order, you have a young family, right?
My best friend from Arizona says to me on the phone one night when I told him, he goes, "Dude, you got to beat this." He goes, "If you don't, your youngest son won't even remember your name."
Yeah.
Like, he won't even remember you. And I'm like, holy,
Yep.
that's not a joke.
And I think
that's the kind of friends I have. I mean, most people will say, "Man, that's terrible," but no, that's a great thing to tell your buddy,
Did that help in the fight when you were or did you just keep that determination about you?
It was never. I was not there was never I'm gonna fail at this.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, you can see the shit that I do. I always work. Like, if
clearly I look around and I see half-assed things.
So something doesn't work, I just change it and make it work. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, okay, that was my idea originally. Like this, I had what you're seeing before you is kind of what I had in mind, but it wasn't the first idea.
I think this is where I was kind of going with this, is that you had all these things that you're up against, but yet you came out on top and you're flying high. And I think it all has to do with recognizing, 1, the people you surround yourself with, and 2, understanding that you weren't finished, man. You had a lot more to do.
Yeah,
I mean, I look at, like, today, just spending the day with you has been really eye-opening for me. And you want to talk, it's funny, real quick, just on a side note, we meet so many people that have lost that spirit. They've lost the drive of the brotherhood in the fire service.
Right.
And then you have a day like today where it just reinvigorates, like, who you are, who we are, what we do.
It's also everything from old to new. I mean,
Right.
you have this new business with these T-shirts and stuff, and then we went over and visited these guys in this old firehouse. I mean, and then look at this stuff.
But this it's just incredible to me, and I'm sitting here in awe, like, and I'm having a hard time getting my words out because
he's having a hard time not playing with this and making the bucket go up.
Yeah, well, I know,
That's
but
what he's having a hard
But I mean,
time.
I just like your story, and this is just scratching the surface.
Oh yeah.
So here we are. I mean, you were drawing circles on the map. You're going through radiation and chemo, and you're still
And it was
trying
so
to
funny.
figure out where you want to get on the job.
So it was so funny because the guys at Progress, everybody was at that point now, the hiring bubble was starting to go on. You know,
Right.
like all the departments were getting bigger. Everybody was hiring. PG was hiring. You know, and Harrisburg was hiring, but you had to live there. And you know, there's some little, you know, you could get hired as a driver here. And so I drew that circle. I wanted money, chance for advancement, specialty teams, things I was interested in. So
Right.
added everything up, and I picked Montgomery County. And I was like, it's the only place I applied. And so all the guys at the firehouse who were also doing the same things were like, dude, that's not how it works. Like, you just take tests, and then that's like wherever you test
they
well,
call, yeah.
that's where you get hired. And I'm like, well, that's what you guys are doing, and none of you have jobs, so that shit ain't working. So
That's fantastic.
so
That's great.
I did, and there's another buddy of mine, Matt Miles. Him and he actually worked at the Turnpike with me. And I goes, I told him, I said, dude, I'm out of here. I said, I'm getting a fire department job. And he goes, well, fucking don't leave me behind. Like, take me with you. So I said, all right, well, here's the plan. And, you know, like everything I do, I go way overboard. And I was like, I sat down and I studied and I got information and I got every resource that I could get. I went down, they have Montgomery County at the time, I don't know if they still do, they have like a night to ask questions. And whoever said there's never been a dumb question has never been to one of those nights. Like, there people haven't even been hired, they haven't even taken the test. Can I wear a leather helmet? Like, you know what? The answer's probably going to come to you if you get hired.
Good luck, buddy.
Yeah. So I went to all three of those, reached out to the recruiting, like, what can I do? They told me some books. So, you know, I kind of did a little bit more research, found out who did the testing, got samples of their tests. Like, I mean, I had, you know, I walked down there, even taking tests. Like, it's like, okay, you're going to be 3 hours, take a power bar with you so that, you know, eat it right before, because it's a, you know, it's like I had
Right.
more information than I needed, and we did really, really well. Same thing with the oral interview. Like, everybody thinks, oh, I do great at the oral interview, and I would have thought the same thing.
When you did the oral interview in Montgomery, did they have the 3 people asking questions with the
Yes.
descending clock?
Yep.
Because that was one thing I remember, for those of you who are listening, how I met Dan was through my connections in PG County, taking a class. But at the time, I was looking to get hired somewhere else. I wasn't exactly happy with my situation, and Dan provided all the information I needed. The one thing that he didn't tell me about, but I didn't ask either, was because I didn't really think that far in advance, was that oral interview. And I remember getting in there, and at the beginning, I was very comfortable, and at the end, like, they hit me with a really good question at the end, and I mean, it was just, it spun me in so many different directions, and that clock's like, you have 30 seconds to answer this.
Yep.
And I was like, this is what I would do.
I was so ready for my interview because I had done so much research, like what they could ask you, way to answer a question. You know, like, you know, almost every department asks a question that implies stealing, but they don't ever ask a question that's saying you saw somebody steal this. So the answer lies in the analogy of the question, not necessarily what they're asking. So if they say something like, they just want they want to see what you're assuming. Are you assuming that guy's stealing it, or are they assuming you're not? And the way to get really well on questions that I learned at the time, maybe it's all changed now, was make sure that you're not assuming anything into the question, but answer the question for all possibilities and manage your time appropriately. And that's what I ended up doing, you know, in a question about, is somebody stealing, or is it possible? So I'd say, hey, there's no reason to believe that this person's stealing. He's a valued member of the fire department. So, you know, this is what I would do. There's no reason. But if he was, you know, and then, so you answer instead of, oh, I would turn that sucker in.
Yeah, right.
You know, they're like, okay, off, you know. So I felt I did really well. Obviously, it worked. I got hired, and you know, I wanted to go to Tacoma Park from before I got hired. I knew somebody who had worked there, and I wanted to go there because I knew they went to fire. I knew they were right in the border with PG, and lo and behold, good things happened. And I ended up at Station 2 and was there for 5 years before I left. Before I left to go to get checked out from the tower. So, yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
So how many years have you been on now in Montgomery County?
I'm working on my 11th year right now.
Wow.
Yep.
And over the course of 11 years, I mean, you've seen your fair share of everything.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
So, I mean, Montgomery County, I'm not overly familiar with the area, I'll be honest. So is it suburban?
It's everything. I mean, we have downtown Silver Spring is huge. There's over 1 million people there, 500 square miles, industrial, rural. I mean, we have farmlands that look like this, you know, driving out here. It's pretty much everything. Like, you know, our engine runs 3,000 calls a year, roughly. but there's engines that run less than 1,000.
Okay.
You know.
There's tankers too. I thought that was one of the weird things is that there's such a split of apparatus there. That
Tankers. We were talking about tankers earlier. I got bombarded with a question on that one earlier. But anyway, so let's move into it. So your career. I mean, we're sitting here behind a tower ladder. With in your man cave with red carpeting and every piece of memorabilia you could possibly imagine. I mean, your love for this industry runs deep, man.
Oh yeah.
And so it's one thing to be a fireman, right? And one thing to love the job, but like you're really into it. So let's talk about that. Where did this passion, this drive of your love of all of it come from? Do you know?
I don't really know, but I do know that trying to have a good moral compass your whole life really plays into it. You know, I know there's a lot of bad stuff that goes on in the fire departments and even in my department, but there's also a lot of good. So, you know, when you think about, I know it goes to the age-old thing, you go back about, you know, we can go into somebody's house, break all their shit, and you come out and they thank you. And that's kind of cliche, but the reality is, especially now, people are calling for things that I really don't consider emergency, but they do. And that's hard to keep that in mind because it may be something minute to us. And I talked with him earlier about something that we did recently for somebody that was just the smallest little thing, but it was the world for that person, you know. And that's just doing the right thing. I mean, don't get me wrong. I love crawling down a hallway with fire over my head and you know my ears stinging, and that's really the ultimate love of it. But there's a lot of other stuff that goes with that, and you know, seeing some of the stuff that goes on, both good and bad. I mean, that's why I have this room and these speakers, so I can come up here and analyze it all. You know, you could go pretty crazy being this passionate about something that's not always all good. You know.
I think that's a fantastic point. I mean, so often we put, you know, the institution on a pedestal and then it lets us down.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
And I don't think we talk about that much in this business. I don't think we talk about, you know, we have these expectations of what we expect and how our day is going to go, and we can always make a difference and always make a save or always do this or always get along with everybody in a firehouse or whatever the case, right?
Yep.
And then all of a sudden we come off of a day that's complete letdown.
Right. Yep.
And it's how do we cope with that? How do we pick ourselves back up, and how do we jump back in with both feet on the next tour? And, you know.
Absolutely. And sometimes it's not just the people. Sometimes it's the department. It's the department decisions. You know, it's hard to remember that there's a lot more that goes into the decisions for the department than just what we see as the firemen. You know, there's legal, there's this, there's that. You know, they're juggling, and I like to believe that they're trying to do the best for us that are the front line. But, you know,
I think that's a really good outlook to have as well, because there's a lot of people who take what comes down the pipe and they think it's very personal to them all of a sudden.
Right.
And like there is somebody out there, let's say the puppet master, but like they're trying to shift things into a good spot for us.
Yep.
But I think, you know, we hit on that before too, and we talk about guys taking it too personal. You know, we had an instance earlier today when we were sitting around talking over lunch, and we talked about a little bit different now of where the captain used to be able to smack you upside the head and tell you to do it again. You did it wrong.
Right.
You effed up. You did it wrong. Go do it right. Learn how to do it right. And not to turn around and say, like, oh, my captain said that I didn't do it right, but I tried my best. And, like, we have to accept responsibility. And too often we're not accepting our own responsibility for our own actions.
Yep.
And we love to point the finger and put it on others. And I think that's an important part to say, though, is that, you know, we have to assume responsibility for our actions. Firefighting is, you know, we're alpha males. Like, we have to perform. And we teach these kids that we search in pairs. In reality, we do not. We teach at the fire academy, we throw ladders in pairs. In reality, we do not. So we need to understand that everything that's being instilled into those new guys, and even the guys with some time on the job, if you're not doing the job correctly, it needs to be corrected, and you need to accept responsibility that it's not being done correctly.
Right.
And so that we do it correctly the next go around. You know, and I think that's missing, and I think that's a good point just to bring up there. But
so what I try to do is I try to make I try to bring positivity. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? It's like I try to not be negative. It's hard. I mean, you know, especially if you're passionate, it's really hard. You know, when when things are not going the way you think they should be going, it's hard to stay positive and be a good influence on your shift and on your department when, it seems like all the cards are stacked against you. I just keep doing good stuff. Do
you think that positive? I mean, all our interactions. I mean, I've known you for months now. You've done a bunch of shirts for us, and you and I talk regularly now, right?
Yep.
And all my interactions with you have really been nothing but on upbeat, positive. Hey, brother, whatever you need.
Yep.
I mean, do you think that has something to do also with what you dealt with years ago with your scare and with your health? Absolutely,
without question.
Yeah.
I mean, hands down, there's no question. When I got cancer, man, for about 15 minutes, I was like, man, this sucks. This is the worst thing in the world. Hindsight, looking back, as soon as I was done with it, I looked my wife square in the eyes. This is the best fucking thing that ever happened to me in my life. This is the single best thing. I wish every one of my friends could experience. Like when the doctor says you need to get your things in order, right?
Yeah.
Like there's no, you can lie to yourself, you can lie on Facebook, you can lie to your friends, but deep down inside you know the truth, right? When the doctor's sitting across from the table and she has to explain that you need to get a will because in 6 months if this chemo and this stuff doesn't work, you're done. Like you can't lie to yourself at that point. It's right there on the table. And I'll tell you what, I know personally a lot of people that would hopefully get a positive turn out of life if they were in that situation. Like I said, when it happened for 15 minutes, woe is me, this sucks, I feel this really, oh my God. But then it was almost like I turned my baseball hat around backwards and like I got with wanting to get the job and getting out of the turnpike and stuff like that. It was like, hell yeah, man!
I'm not
like
done here.
I'm not done.
Yeah.
No, I'm too good for this. And everybody said about how much of an update I'd send out emails with updates and stuff like that. It was a little bit before Facebook. And everyone was like, how can you be so upbeat about it? How can you be joking about it? It's like, how can you not?
Choice.
Yeah, I mean, you have two choices.
Right.
I can cry, and I'm not taking anything. Look, it's a personal thing for a lot of people. Everybody has to deal with their own way. People don't want other people to know and they just want to lay and deal with it, that's great for them if that's how they have to deal with it. That's not how I wanted to deal with it. My thing was, I'm going to baseball games. I'm still doing this. I'm doing that. I went on 7 vacations that year, just in case. You know what I mean? Like, I went on hunting trips. I just did we went to Cabo twice. I mean, I was like, you know what?
Good for you.
If I'm not going to need savings, I'm going to make sure I don't have any. I can rebuild it if I have to.
Yeah.
And, for the person that wants to deal with it, it's a very personal thing. Everybody deals with it their own way. For me personally, it was hands down the best single thing shy of my wife that ever happened to me.
I think that's incredible. I mean, I really do. And I think your spirit and your demeanor, I've watched you today interact with all the different guys and all the people you've introduced us to today. And I mean, you want to talk about like a network of people that boost each other up. I mean, this is like fantastic. And you I think are a big key of that puzzle part of that puzzle. And I just think it's incredible. And
thanks.
Yeah, I do. I mean, I don't know what else there is to say.
Cancer free now.
We were talking. I was watching Jack's interview.
Yeah.
That dude's like, now May 13th, 1993.
I know, right?
No. It was the 14th. I was behind a blue Plymouth on the Cross Bronx. The license plate number was BR549. I don't know why I remember that. I'm like, holy shit! What year did I get diagnosed? I don't know. I know I was 37. I want to say it was 2005, 2003, something like that. But yeah. So.
It's fantastic, and now you're doing what you love.
Yeah. Yep. I've always done what I love, but yes, now
absolutely.
Right?
And I think one of the things that I like, especially about you, Dan, is that you give back to what you love.
Yeah.
And there's 100 different ways, but I know for me, the one, like I remember the fire happening in Back Bay in Boston, and the 2 guys buying it out there and being like, holy crap, this is horrible. And then, it seemed like not very long after, like there was like an alert that went out, and like I don't know which thing I saw first, but I was just like, all right, Dan's mobilizing an army, and this is no joke.
Yeah, we did pretty good with that. That was so we went up to a buddy of ours. Everybody in the room, I think, knows Dan McCauley from Boston, and he invited me up to St. Patty's Day. So we were up there and went to the parade, went out with a bunch of his guys from his firehouse, went downtown, drank with a bunch of guys from 33, 15. I mean, there's just guys everywhere, and had a great time. And as soon as we got home, I literally was at work and jumped on Facebook and saw, I just finished up the rig check, and I jumped on Facebook real quick to see what's going on, and they were talking about this fire in Boston, so I pulled up the live feed, and I listened to the whole thing, man, and I was just sick to my stomach. It's like we all get, and it's really a bad thing that the live feed is out. There's no need for it. I get it, I understand it, but it's, how would you like if my wife was listening to that, and that was me, and that really, really hurt me bad, having just been up there with those guys and everything, and so we went back up for the funerals, and we were at the, sorry guys.
No.
We were at the Union Hall after the funerals, and they were selling T-shirts out of the back of the car for $20 a piece, and great. They sold so many. It was ridiculous. But I looked at the design, and I was like, man, I'd love to take 5 cases back and try to sell them. But I was like, for my business, I knew it was like, you're not. I can't sell this design in Maryland. So I decided, you know what? I called up my artist. I said, listen. I just drew something out, called him up. I said, dude, I want a fucking home run here. Like, this one needs to matter. So, okay, no problem. A couple days later, he sends me a proof. We tweak it up a little bit. We ended up, this is it right here. And so we started selling them. And I never in a million years thought that we would sell as many as we did. And we ended up, it was a full-time job, dude. I would come home. Well, it got, like everything, gets blown out. It's like I was just going to be for the county, for Montgomery County. We did it through the union website, so because they had this website set up already, and we put them on there. And then a buddy of mine, Rob Dorman from Newburgh, New York, said, you know what, we can reach out to the FDNY. So we got it through, I think, the whole 3rd Division, all the firehouses.
I remember seeing that photo of your car or your truck just stacked with boxes. You're like, I'm off to New York City with shirts.
Yeah,
I'm like, shit.
It was crazy. We did the expo, and I didn't know how many shirts to make for expo. We made a really nice. We get a booth every year for our shirt business. Just hand out cards mostly, or if somebody else, like say you guys wanted it, if we were not doing anything, you can have it. So we, it just took off, and we had a booth, and I had 600 shirts that I was mailing to or shipping up to Boston. And then we had 600 shirts that we were going to take to Expo. And Expo is Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And by 2 o'clock on Friday, we were almost out of the 600 that we had for the whole weekend.
Oh my God.
So I called to the shop and I said, did UPS pick up the 600 for Boston yet? And they said, no. I said, don't ship them, bring them over to Expo. Because I knew we could make them on Monday and ship them, and they'd be a day later. So we came back and we sold all 600 shirts the second time. I think the Sunday morning, I had like 3 youth mediums left, and that was it.
And I remember, because I went there on Friday with my department to look at fire engines, and I just remember like seeing Dan sweating, smiling, and it was just constant, like people were just passing, and it was a back and forth.
So, and the neat thing about that for me was, and again, I had no idea the undertaking that it was going to be. I did not foresee that. It was short-sighted on my part. Thank God for my wife and their top. I literally would go down to my basement. I had stacks of T-shirts, 3 or 4 feet tall on tables, and it was like just, order after order. And then I'd load everything up in the truck and go to the post office, and then for the bigger orders, go up to the shop and ship it all out. And the other thing is, with doing something like that, everybody's suspicious. Not everybody, but there's always the people that are suspicious. Yeah. And so I was very meticulous about. 2 people counted the money. I kept the ledger. Oh, I had to buy a pack of Sharpies, write that down. And ultimately, we ended up giving them $45,929.88 from just selling T-shirts. And
That's incredible.
It was nuts. It was nuts. Again, such a tragedy. I've made so many great friends up in Boston. Still, we go up every year. My wife and I go up for the Ed Walsh Foundation fundraiser. It's coming up in March. Be good thing for you guys to go. Bring your wallets, and we always donate a bunch of stuff. And it's just one of those things. I just did it because I had the means to do it. I wanted to do it, and you see the family standing there at the funerals, and you're like, man, it just rips your heart out. At least it does mine. You see the guys, the family was bad enough, but seeing the guys, everybody's second guessing themselves, and there's nothing that could have been done in that case, but you know, you don't know that at the time, and you see the guys mentally beating themselves up, and you feel bad, and you know, fortunately, I just had a way to kind of help them out, and we did.
I think part of that story too. You and we've talked about this story, and I think the other thing too is that you know, your compassion and desire to help really speaks volumes for who you are and your wife and your family and your business and so on. But you've also made a special connection with the families.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And I think, you know, I know, you know, you shared a story with me that I know left a major impact on you. And
unbelievable.
Your life.
And that's what I was talking about with just, you know, you do this little thing,
right?
Just this little thing, and you never know how big of an impact it has. And that's, you know,
that's incredible. I mean, it
really is.
You're talking about, you know, having an opportunity to, you know, a small gesture or something small, and you never know. And that's the thing. Like, you never know. So often we think we have to do something grand or on a big scale, and typically it's the smaller things or the little things that really make such a big difference.
And that's the, you know, life is a fun thing too, because I think when I was young at Progress, you know, didn't have a care in the world, really didn't know what I was doing, but I was all in. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And as you go through your 30s and into your 40s. Once you hit your 50s, you're like, holy shit, you know, maybe I'm not as fast as I am, but maybe I don't have to be that fast. You know what I mean? Because now you have technique but, you know, going a little bit back to what you were talking about, it's like when you're able to do something, like and it took me 52 years to figure this shit out, but if you always do the right thing and you're honest with yourself, you're never going to go wrong.
You win.
I mean, you really won't. And that's how I just try to, you know, just try to operate. And, you know, there's haters, and there's, you know, I'm sure, you know, for every 3 or 4 things people have nice say, I'm sure there's just as many negative.
Without a doubt.
But that's, as you get older, then you know, oh, don't worry about the naysayers. Well, you know, that's hard. But when you just keep doing the right thing and chipping away, and then like you're, you know, that thing that happened that, you know, doesn't need to come out, but to be able to do that, and then to be able to do it for a child, you know, you know, that's the thing. It's like, just keep doing the right thing.
Yeah.
It's not that hard. We make it harder than it needs to be.
Yeah.
You know?
I agree, and that's, you know, I try to live by that with National Fire Radio. I'm adamant about it. Just do the right thing. When you do the right thing, you will win.
And when you say, you know what, I screwed up. It's my fault. Like, I had a hard time when I was young. I couldn't do that.
I get it.
Now, Now my wife tells me all the time. No.
Yeah, exactly. So where are we going to go? We're 45 minutes in. We're going to do another half hour or so, if you're okay with that.
Yeah, whatever.
You want to talk about some jobs? You want to talk about your collecting? You want to talk about... I mean, you've told us so many stories today that just like like outside in your garage, I'm looking at all the signboards. Oh yeah, well we used to have a business where we scrap fire trucks. I buy 7 at a time, and I'm like, what?
Why don't we talk about like progress for a little bit? Progress rather.
Yep.
Because I think that
if you're comfortable talking about it, because
we usually do this thing where we're like, hey, what's off limits, and you're like, hey, don't talk about this stuff, and then like I'm like, all right, cool, and we probably hit everything on it.
Right. No.
I think what's super unique too, and even I mean I'm New Jersey, 3 hours away. Living programs really don't exist, and I think out here living programs have been so prevalent for decades.
Right.
I mean, like forever.
Yep.
Our living started in March of '66.
Yeah.
That's bizarre to me, right? Like I'm trying to talk about it now, and they're like, "What do we need that for?" I'm like, you know, like it's just such a foreign concept to us. But down here, but what do you, I mean? Obviously, that you look at. I mean, all you guys come from a living setting.
Yep.
I mean, that really fuels a lot of it. You know, we're off camera. We were just talking about the live-in programs.
Right.
And, you know, I don't even think we said where we are. You're a fireman in Maryland.
Yep.
We're in
County.
We're in Pennsylvania.
Yep.
Undisclosed location in Pennsylvania.
Undisclosed.
Outside of
I
Harrisburg.
saved it on my phone.
Okay.
I'll be back on Tuesday.
Nice. I love it. I love it. But I think, you know, we were talking about in Pennsylvania in particular, along with Maryland and so on, live-in programs are really an incredible staple in the fire service.
Yep. They have been, and it's interesting now. Obviously, the good places, the places that have a solid reputation, and you don't have to go far to know who those places are. I mean, it doesn't matter whether it's PG County or Harrisburg or anywhere else.
Right.
If a place has a good live-in program, you've seen people. They're the good people that have come out of it. That's where it is, and. Yeah, I mean, for me, especially, I lived in an apartment, outside of Hershey. We're going on, I think at the time, like 250 calls a year, and I'm listening to the scanner, and it's like, there goes Progress with their truck into the city. It's like another fire in the city, another fire in the city. It's like, damn, man, like I want to do that,
Yeah, right.
And I don't have any means to move up to Harrisburg and get an apartment and stuff like that, and then it's like, wow. I was talking about going to school. Here, these guys are, you got this, you got this, I'm right there. It's like, I can't miss. So that's, and fortunately for me, I mean, man, when I moved in, there were some really, really solid dudes there. There was a group of guys going out, that had, we're not really good at graduating people. At least we weren't then. But we were really good at graduating good firemen. And, Mike Madison was chief of 33. He was, he wasn't a live-in, technically. He was going to college in Penn State, Middletown. And he was there when I was there. So, it's just like the same names kept popping up. And it was, for me, it was a game changer. I mean, if I would have stayed in Union Deposit, I don't know how much more exposure I would have gotten. Seeing those guys, like, I had never been told to get a tool when you got off the rig. I never knew about having an assignment before you get off the rig. I mean, again, we're talking the mid-'80s. And then, all of a sudden, here comes, truck 32 with 6 dudes. Everyone's got a hook. Everyone's got a, somebody has a saw. Like, holy shit, these dudes they're going to battle.
They got it together, yeah.
Right, and it's like in 2 minutes, I've been on this fire for, how long, and these guys roll up and everybody's working. The truck's in service, they're hooking up, flowing water. I'm like, wow, like, how do I get involved in this? And then, a friend of a friend, yeah, okay, we move in, and I signed a live-in contract, and from there on out, it was like, I didn't really know about training. Training wasn't such a big deal back then. It's like, oh yeah, we train all the time. We're going here to burn. We're burning this house. Our chief officers were always looking. Harrisburg was kind of building out at the time. It's like, I don't even know how many houses we burned down. That's how I learned. I mean, it's like, okay, go cut the roof. Like, we've only cut on plywood. Yep, this is it. Go, you go cut the roof. We nail it back together. We do it again, and we do it again, and we burn the whole place down. How we never burnt somebody up, I don't know. But, I mean, some of the best training that you could get, when you're shitting your pants, when, you're green, you're like, oh, my God, no. Well, after you do that 4 or 5 times, you're like, wow, this really can work. Right. You just got to count on everybody doing their job. And there is part of the problem today is you put one person in that group of people that have to do their job, and you got a problem. Yep. And that's where I think we need to work better. The good dudes that are in the fire department, we need to make sure that you bring those people as much work as it takes. You got to get them up to speed.
Yeah, that living culture. Just for we hit markets across the country, so there's a lot of kids and older guys that just they're not even familiar with the concept. And me personally, I didn't know live-ins was an option. I mean, the internet was just coming online when I was graduating high school. I went off to college. I had no idea that there were places like Pennsylvania and Maryland and Delaware where there were live-in programs where I could go live in a firehouse, run 5,000 calls a year, and also attend, college. I mean, it was
and get help doing it.
Right, yeah. Absolutely. Yep. And for me, I'm like, man. And then the internet came on board, and everybody remembers Kentland was the big first name that hit the internet and was like, these guys go to 7,000 runs a year. They're volunteer. Like, how the hell does that work, right? And then you start to dissect it, and you see this culture that emerges. Mm-hmm. And I think for you being a live-in, and Don, and a bunch of other guys, I mean, it's hearing the stories that are coming out of there. That really was a culture that fueled, I think, your passion for it, right? I mean, you're a small-town volunteer. You see an opportunity. You want to better yourself and better your firefighting knowledge and skills. You go to a bunking department, a live-in department. And then you just graduate.
But it's also like people that are really gung ho, and they're all thinking the same way too, which helps you.
Yeah, I mean, surround yourself with people you want to be with, right?
I think there's another thing I want to ask you about because you were in Progress. I don't want to say a long time ago because that's not correct, but
no, it is.
It is a while back. I think is a good way. I know one thing that from being in Hyattsville down in PG County. And I'm sure Matt can kind of chime in from the back here, being from Kentland, but we've had guys come down to the firehouse and they see these young kids who have tremendous responsibility they would never put on their members, but they do. Was that the same situation for you back then in Progress, where they were taking young people in? They were like, "Hey, like buck up, son. You're in charge. Like you can't."
Yeah, I mean we
that mentorship and everything else.
Yeah, I mean it was. I don't want to say it was the Wild West, but I mean you have 10 guys, and only like one rig might be going out with 4 seats. You know what I mean? So you had to be quick, and we all wanted to go to a fire. So. You know, at the time when I first started there, our aerial scope was open in the back. So like when we would have a 30-mile run, a 20-mile run up to Dauphin or up into, I mean, in the middle of winter, you're hugging the dog box and stuff like that. Right. You're like, man, I bumped 3 people out of the way to get to this seat, you know?
Yeah.
But no, yeah, I mean, we had a lot of responsibility. It was kind of, when I was there, we were going through a change. Like they didn't want any of the live-ins to drive, and then they realized, hey, wait a minute, having a driver in quarters is as good as having 10 guys in quarters.
Right.
So you know, they put together, and the same thing. You know, like the guy, I don't want to overstate it, but they really at the time when I was there, and what I see now, it seems like they have a really solid program. I know, you know, like when I got there, my Proby book was like a 3-ring binder in the 80s. You know, that's standard now, but it wasn't then.
No, right.
You know?
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's like the shit that I had to do to get checked off on the truck was, in my opinion, at the time, I don't want to say ridiculous. I understand it now. At the time, I was like, I have to start this saw 100 times? Like, you know what I mean? Like, there's checkoffs and stuff like that.
Right.
Ultimately, looking back on it, like I told you about throwing the ladders, it's like, when a person will take the time to make sure that you throw a ladder the correct way every time, and you have to do that, say 20 times, if on the 20th time you screw up, he makes you go back to the truck and start all over again. You know?
Yeah.
And like we would be on the rig on the way back, and like I said, Harrisburg was building at the time, so we would be on the way back from training, and he'd stop and he'd say, that place is on fire, ladder it. And it's like, you got to start pulling ladders, and you know, it's like, you know, we just got done spending 4 or 5 hours throwing ladders, you know, and now you're like in full gear throwing ladders again.
Yeah.
But
there's something to be said for that, right?
It's a road to mastery, really.
Right.
Without a doubt.
But this is a craft, so yeah.
I'll put it this way. I threw a hell of a lot more ladders at Progress than I did at my training academy to get hired as a career firefighter.
Yeah. I believe it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I believe it. Yep. I absolutely believe it. I mean, I look at, you know, put it this way, right? Free throws in basketball, Larry Bird. You know, 5,000 shots a day, right? To better his craft. I mean, that's how it works.
Yep.
Like, if you want to be good and excel, you got to put the time in.
Right.
You got to hustle. I think what you were hitting on too, Rob, just before, and I just want to kind of go back to it. When in a live-in type program, you know, you might have a guy that's 18 and you might have a guy that's 25.
Right.
Right? And I think what's fun, Rob tells this story every once in a while, and I love it because it puts it in perspective where, you know, an outsider looking at that goes like, well, you know, why is the young kid riding the OV seat?
Right.
Shouldn't the older guy be in the OV seat? We're like, we're all created equal here.
Yep.
Like, you're expected to be able to do the job and do the job correctly.
Right.
So it doesn't matter how old or how many years you have in. We're there to do the same job.
Right. And it's, you know, when I was done there, or right before I moved out, I was a lieutenant and on the truck. And it was really nice for me, I mean, because that's what I fell in love with, because there was more to learn, more to do. It seemed to me like the engine, as much fun as it was, there was more opportunities and more things to master and more different ways to try different things, you know, like forcible entry and, you know, just so much more going on with the truck. That's kind of how I gravitated towards it. But I like to think that I was good at it then and now. But that's the other thing. You need to figure out how much do you want to do. You know what I mean? Like, and just stay on it. And then it's funny because we did a thing a couple years ago in Montgomery County. Jason Blake implemented this thing where we were doing some of the truck stuff that we, you know, I mean, you go through the academy, and if you don't train in a company setting, we really don't offer anything else. So we did this in-service training. We did vent under isolate search. We did cutting garage doors. We did cutting roofs, stuff like that. And there was so much great feedback from it. You know, it's like guys are like, man, I hadn't, you know, really done any of this stuff. I don't normally ride a truck. I hadn't done any of this stuff for years. And, you know, I was talking with him afterwards, and I was like, you know, thank you so much for letting me help, you know, in the teaching of this. But it's amazing, something that is so, I don't want to say, I mean, I feel comfortable to start a saw climb a ladder, restart it, cut it, do it. Like, I feel confident to do that wherever I would be asked to do it at work. And I had no idea that some of our workforce did not have that same confidence. Yeah. And I owe that to Progress and the Live-In program and the people that were there at the time, and it took the time to train me and the other kids. And because there's a lot of kids that were there when I was there and later that are officers and even career people in other departments. And I understand it with the career. It's like, guys get hired, they have families, they got kids, there's t-ball, there's soccer, there's all this stuff. So it's hard to go to these, great classes that are going on. But the things you learn, the little tricks that these guys are willing to teach you, I mean, it's priceless,
Save seconds here and there. And
yeah,
can really
it's like,
make your life
I
easier.
forget who said it, but like you save a couple seconds on every process, all of a sudden you've saved a minute, and it's 100% true.
And I think for myself, I've been an outsider looking in, going into Hyattsville. Like, that was one thing that, like, I couldn't believe that I was taught a way. It wasn't the wrong way. Right. But then I remember, like, this guy, Matt Leonard, came into the station, and he said, all right, truck's going out to the to Miffrey for a class. You're getting on it, and you're going to throw ladders the whole time. And I'm like, all right. And I'm like, when am I going? And it was Chris Evans and Chester, Mr. Lawler there. He's but they went and showed me how to throw that ladder by myself. Yep. And they're like, how do you throw a ladder? And I'm like, well, 2 people. And they're like, nope, you're going to do it this way. And and I pitched ladders the whole night. I think I can't remember the cranky guy that's always at Miffrey down there. But Tim Delaney, is that it? I think Delaney's like, what you're doing? And I'm like, I'm learning how to throw ladders. He's like, where are you from? I'm like, Poughkeepsie, New York. What do you do up there? I'm a career fireman. He's like, huh. And he just walked off.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And it's funny, too, because, like, when I got to Tacoma Park, like, once I got hired, I made it no secret that I wanted to go to Tacoma Park to all the instructors, and I tried to be as good as I could be, for a 40-year-old guy in a career academy.
Is that the place to be?
It was at the time.
Yeah, I don't know. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it was, and that's why I said, I knew a fireman that Matt also knew, and he was from Tacoma Park, and they went to as much fire as anybody in Montgomery County, and it ended up getting there, and I was like, man, I cannot believe that all this hard work has gotten me to where I want to be, and now I can't screw up. Yeah. It's like
it's game time.
Now, it's game
big
time.
Leagues, man. Yeah, right.
When I met Dan and we were in this Instructor 1 class, I was like, oh, he's one of these guys from Montgomery County, because some of the guys would make jokes about going to MoCo for different things, and they're just being young kids. But I remember, like, going to a box after I got to the class, and I had gone to Hyattsville, and he had actually gone into work, and I'm coming up the stairs, and right behind me is him. He's got a high-rise face. Like, oh, hey, what are you doing here? Like,
yeah.
He was in it to win it.
No, that's fantastic. But I mean, the culture like that. I mean, that's to just get back on where we were, the live-in culture.
Yeah.
I think we get so many messages from people that watch and listen to our stuff who are in a small town or they're in a department that they just feel like they can't get anywhere with. And that seems to be real common across the board. The all-star companies, these A companies that like really promote and create incredible firemen, sadly is not the norm anymore.
Right, and like I said, when we first started talking about this, when I was in lawn, it took that one guy who took time with me when I was little dude, and was able to like kind of perpetuate and kind of get the path started. For somebody who is in a small town, you have I don't want to say the world by the balls, but there is a bunch of different, like, you can go pretty much anywhere you want to go. And if you're willing to work, like, none of these places that I know of, and I know of a lot of the live-in places, expect you to know everything when you get there.
Right,
the best thing to do is get there and say, hey,
teach me
what you want me. And I am sorry, it's going to take you a while, but I will do my best. And at the end, if my best isn't good enough, I'll roll out. But if you show honest effort, and we've had some issues with some probies that have gone through some of my stations at the career level, just show me effort. Right. Like, I'll teach you the same thing every shift. I'll spend all day on the color red if you want me to. If you show me you're trying to learn what the color red is, it is my job to teach you to make sure you understand. But the second that I see that you don't give a shit, then I don't give a shit.
I get it. I get that. And I think, it's like anything. Anything in life, anything worth anything in life, you have to work for.
Yeah. But anybody who wants to go, I mean, if someone's listening, it's like, man, we run 200 or 300 calls a year. I'm a small department, whatever. Get a PA Fireman magazine and look at all the advertisements for live-ins. Get on.
Why don't you guys talk about what you need to get on those as a kid volunteer? Because that's something that we really haven't talked about.
You just
much.
call.
Yeah.
I want to be. I want
Yeah,
to
but
be.
need a few things.
I think Tucker's bringing up a good point. Like there's because he's got an idea in his head of what is needed.
Yeah.
And there really isn't.
Are there
a whole
any
lot.
I think there's.
requirements,
I mean, each station would have their own. I'm sure Kentland has some stuff. I know Progress has some stuff. I know when I went through, you had to be enrolled in Hack. By the time we were done, by the time I was done there, we didn't. That was no longer a requirement. Because what happened was, so one of the township residents who was a member was going through a divorce, and he ended up living there. So it was like, oh, wait a minute. So now, now you have, you can't really say these guys have to because they don't live in the township, and now this guy, is staying there. And ultimately, it benefits the fire company. I would say each department you would have to look into. But I mean, the last PA fireman that I looked at, which was last year during Expo, I'm like, man, it's like Hamden Township, Progress,
I saw
Lower Allen.
They have booths where they advertise at these trade shows for
you live in
live-ins.
Montgomery County, Burtonsville, Hyattsville, Berwyn Heights. I mean, you'd say I want to learn ladders and rescue. Berwyn Heights has a live-in.
They don't have a
Go to the
single
No Hose
engine in that
Nation.
house.
Yeah, No Hose Nation.
Truck and Rescue Company.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They still have 2 tillers or just 1? I know for a while they had 2, but
I don't know.
Just one.
But I would tell you this, there is every opportunity in the world to better your position. But it takes initiative and desire. And what drives me nuts are the guys that sit there and bitch and moan that they want bigger and better, but they don't do anything to get to it.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like guys that want to get hired. If you want to get hired on the job, you do it right. You do it right. Dan Story. He did it right. He applied, he worked his ass off, he even studied for the oral interview.
I didn't tell this in part of the story, but my wife laughed at me. I told her, I said, I'm going to put 40 hours into studying for the test. She goes, what do you mean? I said, well, I have all this stuff that I got from the captain at the recruiter, and I have all these books and stuff like that, and I studied. I got up at 6 o'clock in the morning, took a shower, sat down, took a half an hour for lunch, and every day for a week, that's all I did was study. And one of the things I had to laugh was the 50 most common misspelled words, and I would have gotten them wrong. It was 3 that I got right, and just like little tricks on studying on how to take a test, like draw a line, the questions you absolutely don't know, skip over.
But you have to understand that what you're talking about is the exception.
Well, it is.
It's not the rule.
It is, but again, it comes into how serious am I going to take it?
I agree.
Like, am I going to say, oh, I want to get the job, but I don't do anything? Like, Montgomery County, classic example. Go in there, sit down, big auditorium. On the card, bring this card. Do not wear a baseball hat. Do not bring a purse.
Yep.
Right there on the card. It says it. Bring this card.
It's amazing.
Bring this card.
Yep.
No baseball hats. No purses. Right. So I'm standing there, we're sitting there. I'm holding my card. I'm like, okay, I don't have a baseball hat on. Always have a baseball hat on. I don't have my purse today. Right. And I have the card. I'm good. So they stand up and they say, okay, it's 8 o'clock or 7 o'clock. How many people have purses and baseball hats? And not half, but
A handful.
100 people
Yep.
put their hands up. Okay,
ya.
take all that stuff out to the car. Now, if I was running this shit,
See ya.
as soon as that door closed,
Yeah, lock
I'd have
it.
locked it, and then when they came back, I'd be like, follow directions. Like,
I agree.
you obviously don't want it. So
I agree.
if you want the job, in my opinion, make getting the job a job.
Absolutely.
Right? And then pretend you're doing it for yourself. Say, I am going to do the absolute best I can do to get this. And if I don't get hired, I'm going to go and I'm going to ask them why I didn't get hired. And I'm going to find out what I have to change.
Yeah,
If I
that's a
go,
learning
I'm going to go and say, why didn't I interview well? What didn't I do right? I remembered everybody's name from my interview panel because I was going to, if I don't get hired, I'm going to go back to these people and I'm going to ask them how could I improve my score? And if you go into it with that, mentality, there are a lot of jobs out there right now.
Yeah.
And it is still the greatest job in the world. It's not what it once was, but it's still what you make it.
It's still great.
It
And
is.
You know what?
It
If
is.
you
It
want
really
it,
is.
go get it.
Right.
It's not going to be handed to you. And I think
Yep.
that's part of the issue, right? I think a lot of times, everything nowadays, I look at my kids and I look at the stuff I do for them. And I'm like, man, my father wouldn't do that for me.
Right.
You know, and I worry that I'm entitling my kids because it's who we are, it's who we've become, and I'm not an easygoing dad. Like I'm pretty stern with my kids, but there's things I do that I'm like, you know, man, am I being too lenient? You know, and then I'm like, you know what, I'm all right. But the thing is this: you have to instill those morals, ethics, and desires into your children, and you hope that they bring them up the line. What the kids in the firehouse have to learn is that once you get to the firehouse, whether you're 16 or 18, you're treated as a man.
Yeah.
And you're expected to be one.
Right.
And so you don't get to play that other card that it's like, well, somebody's going to do it for me, or it's going to get done because I didn't do it, somebody else will do it. We have to get rid of all that. And I think that's where some of the...
It goes from dishes in the sink to cleaning up
We were
somebody's
talking
mess.
about that earlier. We were talking about...
It kind of goes like, you know, pick up after yourself. Well, yeah, but you know what? Pick up after other people as
be a
well.
team player.
Because it's like, here's the thing. If you only pick up after yourself and there is a paper bag or something on the floor, stuff like that, and you're stepping over it while you're cleaning up after yourself, maybe, just maybe, the guy who left that maybe he left it on the counter and some wind blew it onto the floor. You know what I mean? But you're just as bad by stepping over it, by making an effort to step over it to clean up after yourself. So, again, going back to do what's right every time, pick it up. It's your firehouse. It's your house.
I agree.
Yeah, I mean,
I
and it's
absolutely
simple. Like, somebody's not going to pick it up, but they're going to step over it. I mean, it's your firehouse. Pick it up, throw it out. What did it? Nothing. No effort at all. No effort at all. And if you do that every time, you know what? The saws are a little bit low, but they could stay. They don't have to be filled up. Fill them up. You know what I mean? Because when you're on the roof and you've got to make that last connecting cut, and you run out of gas, is it going to matter then? Absolutely, it is.
Without a doubt.
Yep.
All right, so Captain Jones?
Yeah, Adam Jones.
Adam
Yep.
Jones, all right.
He's actually assistant chief now of our training academy. Yep.
So you got Newman. So what happened there?
So like I said, they had offered 3 nights. Montgomery County did. It was like a ask any questions that you wanted to ask. They kind of gave you a study guide. They gave you a list of some books on interpersonal skills, things they were looking for, and they gave you an opportunity to ask about the job as well. So they got up, they did their little spiel, and then people asked questions afterwards. And then they gave you an email and a phone number and said, if you have any questions later on, call the recruiting office. And I went to that first one, and there was a couple good questions. I had a few questions that I had written down that I asked personally to one of the recruiting people that were there. And then I was like, man, there was a couple good questions that I didn't think of. And again, you know, I'm talking 100 miles from my house in Rockville, Maryland. So there was two more of those things, and I told my wife, I said, you know, I feel like I have to go to these other ones. I might miss out on a potentially good question, you know, and if I'm all in, I'm all in. So I drove again, signed up, and you know, he's like, haven't you been here before? And I was like, yes, sir. This is, you know, my 3rd night. He's like, why you keep coming back? And I said, well, that some of the questions that were asked the first night were really good. Some of them weren't. I was embarrassed to be in the audience, but some of them were really good. And I came back the 2nd night, you know, there were still, you know, good questions, but I didn't want to miss out on maybe a good question. And he said, really? And I said, yeah. And he gave me his card, and I still have it. I said, if you have any questions at all, let me know. And then he asked me on my way out, he's like, did you sign in tonight? I said, yes, sir. He said, all right, no problem. And then I reached out once or twice to the recruiting office while I was, you know, in the process with a few, not mundane questions, but a few questions that I just wanted to verify before I went and took the test. So I think I don't know if there's an ability. He clearly saw effort on my part. Do you know what I mean? I don't know if he took the lists, the sign-up sheets, and compared who made it all 3 nights. I don't know if he didn't do anything, but he did ask me, and we've never talked about it since then. I know him, but I got hired, so it is what it is, you know?
Yeah. Well, and I think one thing that, and maybe I'm just, you know, if I'm not remembering it correctly or something, just smack me in the head, but that for you, it was somebody from the Department of Rank that actually took an interest in you. Right. Like, noticed the effort, and it was like a motivation.
Yeah, and not only that, but like, the dude's shirt was like iron, like, collar pins were perfect, badge was polished, like, hair was perfect, and like, you know, he had they have, like, he was the captain of the recruiting, and then they had a couple, like, firefighters that were there talking as well. But man, I just remember this dude is like, everything's together. Like, he's 100%. And the same thing, and that's what I think you're referring to. I was like, man, this dude is on point.
Squared away.
Like, he's not going to be a captain long, and ultimately he wasn't.
Yeah.
Right.
But
must be something about captains with their hair being impeccable. I know this guy from Camden, and his hair is always on point as well. So, but,
that was amazing today, wasn't it? Oh, I just got out of bed. His hair's perfect.
Well, Dan, thanks for having us down here.
Absolutely. It's always good to get to have a Tiller Time beverage.
Excuse me. Let's talk about that real quick, right? So, Dan, I mean, thank you. Thanks for doing this with us and inviting us to your home and your business and introducing us to the guys down at the Allison, which is a whole nother animal that we hope to get into, and so on. But real quick, the whole idea and premise behind Tiller Time is you really helped us with doing the shirts and the design and so on. And so, Dan, thank you for having us here today, brother. This
Welcome
has been
anytime.
Fantastic.
Beer's always cold.
And, and it's labeled
loud.
and it's labeled really well too. I mean, this is cool. I'm excited to get. I'm taking these empties with me. I hope we don't get pulled over on the way. But I mean, it's just so cool. And I think this just speaks to your character and who you are. It's everything you do 100 miles an hour.
I do.
And you do it 100%. And
Try to.
The fact that you invited us here and we've developed this relationship with you is awesome. And I can't thank you enough for spending the day with us.
Absolutely.
And we're not even done. We got a lot. more to
Look
do.
around. I'm sure you're gonna have a million questions of. I mean, there's so much weird stuff sitting around here, and everybody always asks me, "Hey, what do you collect? What can I get you?" And I was like, you know what? I only collect the shit that I really like, and I don't know it until I see it. I mean, I don't collect helmets. I have some. I don't collect nozzles. For me, most of the stuff I really enjoy is odd truck stuff, but I don't know it until I see it.
Right. Right. Super cool. So anyway, thank you. Thanks for having us, and guys, thanks for listening. As always, we absolutely appreciate the support.
Yeah,
and
the studio audience too.
Live audience today.
Live audience.
Live audience.
Moving up in the world. So anyway, guys, for Rob, Tucker, and myself, and of course Dan, thank you, brother, for having us.
You're very welcome. Come anytime.
Thanks for tuning in. National Fire Radio.